Hi there, this is Jake Gillispie. I own a little company called Grindhouse Graphics that I use to sell my art, and I do a lot of marker work. So, purpose of this video, I wanted to go over Copic markers specifically. I get a lot of questions on Instagram, what brand I use, how I do things I do. So this video is for newbies. If you're already using Copics, none of this is going to be that informative, or it's going to be old hat to you. But if you're just dipping your toes into the market and want to get into markers, hopefully this will be helpful and informative. I'm going to go over some other markers versus Copics. I'm going to go over the type of markers Copics makes. I'm going to go over the color chart, a couple of tips with new markers and the colorless blender, as well as I'm going to recommend a few shades if you're into skin tones. That'll lead into my next video as well. So let's get started. I've been dealing with markers for probably the past 20 years off and on. I started in art school working with these, they're called trias. Kind of a cool marker. It has 3 tips on it. It has a super fine point tip, almost like a ballpoint pen, and then a less fine point tip, and then a standard chisel tip on one end. These, I don't even know if these are around anymore. I had to buy them for a specific curriculum in school. So I started with these. Only had like a secondary and primary set. Not a lot of options, and they were quite expensive, but that's what I started with. Then I moved on to these markers by Chart Pack, which are called ad markers. They're big layout markers. I've got quite a few of these, but they have a broad tip that comes to kind of a fine point. Kind of a cool marker, but it doesn't blend that well. They're made for big architectural, like landscape type layouts if you're working big with these. The major problem is, one, they don't blend as well as I like. They also they stink really bad. They have the alcohol smell like dry erase markers. So if you're locked in a room with them, you're going to get a headache. It's a high, and it's not a good high. So went from those. Another marker I've tried, these are called Tombow ABTs. Super cheap, not very great. I do like how skinny and long they are. It's like a paintbrush. It's got a kind of a cool brush tip that's flexible on one end, and then just a kind of a fine point on the other end. I think I bought 10 or 12 skin tones for $10 one day at the art store, and I don't even think I got my $10 out of them. Don't recommend them, not that great, but they're out there. Then the most popular marker, probably well recognized, is Prismacolor, which if you're going colored pencils, I totally recommend Prismacolor. For markers, not so much. They are cheap though, and let me say this: you can, if you're any artist worth his weight, can get the same results, the end results, from Prismacolors as you can for Copics. The difference is some of the options that I'll explain here in a second that Copic has that Prismacolor doesn't. But these, I want to say they're about $3.50 a marker. I haven't bought them in a while. And they're a decent marker, and they've got quite a few out there, and they're easy to get. Michaels carries them, Blix carries them, everybody that carries art supplies usually carries Prismacolors. So difference being $3.50 a marker from Prismacolor, roughly $6.50 to $7 marker from Copic. So same marker, let's say you get the same amount of ink out of each and you use it up, both of them. There's a $3.50, there's $7. When you're done with this, you throw it in the trash, you go back to the art store and spend another $3.50 for a whole new marker. When you're done with Copics, you go and buy the appropriate refill for, let's say, $7. It's $5 to $7 depending on where you buy them. So you spent $14 versus the $3.50, but one refill bottle, you can get roughly, I want to say 35 to 40 refills out of this. I don't like to overfill my markers, so I go kind of light, sparingly on it. But so let's say 35 markers, 35 refills plus a marker, that's equivalent of 36 markers for $14 versus $3.50. For 36 versions of this, you have to buy it times $3.50. That's what, $120 something versus 14. So there's a big reason right there. Copics are refillable, Prismacolors are not. On top of that, if you did go through 36 markers, your nib is going to get, I don't know if you can see in the video, but it's kind of frayed at the end. It doesn't have that point like it does when they're fresh. And also, if you can tell, it's kind of blackened on the point. Reason for that is I sketch things out in pencil, and sometimes I go over the lines with my markers, and that the lead will tint the end of your marker somewhat. So solution for that is you go and buy spare nibs, which they sell, which they're usually $5 a pack, and really easy to swap them in and out. And you can also, if you wanted to, put two different, a chisel tip on both ends or a super brush on both ends, whatever you want. That's an option for you. On top of that, you can also buy a blank marker, an empty marker, an empty ink bottle, and you could mix inks and make your own custom color marker if you wanted. There's 354 colors, I believe, so they got you pretty well covered on colors. I don't know anybody that actually mixes their own colors, but again, something else you can't do with Prismas. Let's go over the types of markers Copic makes. So the main marker is the sketch marker. All their colors that Copic makes is in the sketch. It has the chisel tip end for your fills, and the super brush end, which is flexible. You can get a fine line out of it, you can get a broad stroke out of it. It just depends on how much you practice with it. It's flexible. It's the super brush end is the best end for blending your colors together. Learn it, live it, love it. The other types they have, the regular Copic marker, not quite as many colors as the sketch, but quite a few. These are more for the scrapbook crowd. Has a square body, has the chisel tip on one end, and it has sort of a fine point on the other end, but you can get a finer line with the super brush than you can with the fine point. It tends to bleed a little bit. I have a couple of these spare in some of my main colors like black and C1 and whatnot. I just use them as backups. They also have the Copic wide marker, which has a big fat broad tip on it. Great for backgrounds and fills where you use a specific color. Not available in every color, just some of the main ones. The only thing I don't like about these is they're refillable as well, but it takes a lot of ink to refill them. And once you refill them, I can't get the ink to evenly disperse across the tip as well as when it's brand new. So like this one, when this one's out, I will probably go buy a new marker versus refilling it, simply because it just works better brand new. And then the fourth type they have is called a chow, which I don't have one, but they're about the size of a regular pen. This is not a chow marker, and I think it has a super brush end on one end and a small chisel tip or something on the other. Again, for the scrapbook crowd, kind of the same as the sketch, but smaller. You're not going to have as much ink in there, and not every color is available in a chow. So there's our types of markers. Wanted to show you the Copic color chart. So say you bought your Copic markers, you're just getting started out. What you want to do is print out the hand color chart that they have on their website. It's a free download. I'll post a link in the notes with the video, but if you go to copicmarker.com, scroll down to the bottom of the main page, there's a resource library tab. Hit that, and it's going to take you to a page, and they've got like their catalog. There's an Adobe color swatch file for Copic that's a free download, so if you color in Photoshop or Illustrator, you can use the same colors. I like to do that, so I'm working off the same palette digitally and analog. But you want to look for the hand color chart blank. Print that out, that PDF, like this, and use some thicker, nicer paper, not the standard printer paper, so it doesn't bleed through. It's a little more durable. And then as you get a color, fill it out. And this tells you exactly what you're working with, what you have. Use it to color match when you're working off a reference photo. Use it to like I want a light yellow to a dark yellow, or a green to a yellow. It's like your painter's palette. It's the most important tool. Use it everywhere. Stick it in your sketchbook. Everywhere your markers go, this goes. So there's that. When you're buying new markers, a lot of times what will happen is they're loaded with ink. They're pretty loaded. Sometimes, not every time, but sometimes this will happen. So you can be drawing with a brand new marker, and then all of a sudden, without warning, it just blots a ton of ink on your page, and it just bleeds out. So one thing to prevent that, when you're starting out, take a blank page and kind of get some of that excess off before you go to your actual work. Not a ton, because you don't want to waste a lot of ink, but don't go straight with a brand new marker to something you've been working on without bleeding it out a little bit, because it sucks when that happens. If you watch the top of the tip where it meets the canister when you're marking, when it's about to blot out like that, it will get real wet and dewy looking, oversaturated. If you see that start to happen, lift your marker off the page, because it's gonna dump on you. So be careful for that. If that does happen and it's not a huge spill, they sell a, let me get this out of here, a colorless blender. It's number 0, which it's a deceiving name. It's not actually good for blending colors together. It's more like a paint thinner or a magic eraser. It actually draws the pigment out of the ink. So if you go outside the line where you wanted to, just a little bit, you can actually if you mark on that, hopefully you can see that in the video, it's actually drawing ink, it's lightening it up, is what it does. Or if you want to do some sort of texture, if you dot it around, it'll leave spots and whatnot. But you can correct small mistakes with the colorless blender. It's not good for taking two colors and meeting them in the middle with the colorless blender. It's not going to do what you want. It's going to leave it kind of muddy because it's pulling pigment out. It's lightening your picture. But I would recommend buying one of those when you start out. It's good for small mistakes. If you get a big bleed, though, there's no fixing it unless you switch up your style completely. Last thing before I go, skin tones. The next video I do is going to be going through some skin tones in an actual tutorial on a picture. So I wanted to recommend a few to buy. That you can buy in 72 color sets individually. I think they have 24 color sets. They have a skin tone set. They have these blender sets. I buy them all individually as needed. You always go with markers from lightest to darkest. So what I recommend, if you can only buy a couple of colors, start with the 00, the not quite the lightest, but one of the lighters, and work your way up from there. If you want skin tones, the 11 colors I use the most, I start with the E, the earth tones, the quadruple 0, all the way through the E04. So E quadruple 0, triple 0, double 0, 01, 02, and 04. And then on the reds, the R quadruple 0, R triple 0, R double 0, R01, and R02. Those 11 colors, if you're doing white people, that's what you're going to use primarily. That's what I use primarily. There are a lot of other variations beyond that to get some other shades. Like, for say, if you were doing black people, you want to start like with the E23, E25, E27, E29 will give you a pretty good range to work with. When you're first buying them, if you go from one number far, like say you bought an E000 and an E13 and you want to blend them together, you can. It's not going to be very smooth. You want to blend them sequentially as much as possible. So that's why, like, if you can only buy a couple of the earth tones, get like an E00, E01, E02, and E04, instead of an E01, an E13, an E21, an E40. You know, keep them close, and your blends are you're gonna transition a lot smoother, a lot more seamlessly at first. The other colors come into play when you're doing dark shadows and highlights and whatnot. You can do some other effects, but when you're getting started, keep them close. I think that's it for this video. The next video I'll go through skin tones, and then I'll do another one for hair, and probably another one for blood and gore, because I like to do that stuff. So if you're not already, follow me on Instagram. I'm at Jake Gillispie. Or Facebook, I search Grindhouse Graphics, and that's graphics with an X at the end, not a CS, because either I can't spell or I'm very extreme. I'll let you be the judge. But thanks for listening. Hope this helps. If not, Sorry for wasting your time, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.